Hello, this is Ruth Kime, and welcome back to the Seals of Revelation is what we're going to be studying today. And we are going to start in Revelation chapter 5. And we are going to basically overlay these few chapters on top of the chronology that we already learned in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, the parallel passages in the gospel that talk about the chronology of the end times. So hopefully you have your fill in the blank sheet and can follow along. All right, so we are going to get started in verse 1 of chapter 5 in Revelation. Just to give you some context, I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but I really encourage you to do that. I'm just going to do little, maybe 3 verses, and then please go back after that and check and make sure that you understand the context. So, verse 1 of chapter 5 of Revelation. Then I saw in the right hand of the one seated on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides, sealed with 7 seals. So it's kind of like this picture shows. And I also have a scroll here. So imagine it as until you can't get into the scroll that has writing on both sides until first you have what I'm going to call an overview. This is an announcement of what is coming, okay? At least that's how I interpret the seals, because they're seals on a scroll to be opened. Okay, and then verse 4, I've wept and wept because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or even to look in it. Then I'm going to skip to verse 9, and they sang a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slaughtered and you purchased people for God by your blood from every tribe and language and people and nation. You made them a kingdom and priests to God, and they will reign on the earth. Okay, so Jesus is the one that then they're weeping in heaven because no one was found worthy to open the scroll that has the 7 seals until Jesus comes and he's able to open the seals and get this all started so that the kingdom of heaven can become the kingdom of earth. So they then rejoice and they sing this new song because Jesus was found worthy to open the scroll. So that's the kind of the backdrop of the seals. And so we're going to start with the seals in chapter 6 of Revelation. And that will be the main part that we are in today, the main part of the Bible. Okay, so let's get started. Then I saw the Lamb, that's Jesus, open one of the 7 seals. And I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider held a bow. A crown was given to him, and he went out to conquer. He went out as a conqueror in order to conquer. Okay, so if you notice in the picture, he's got a bow, but he doesn't have any arrows. So that I think is significant. I think that it is showing that he comes with the threat of force, but he doesn't actually force, but he's subduing the earth. The reason why I believe that all 4 of these horsemen, there's going to be 4 horses that we're going to get into. The reason why I think that all 4 of them are global is because in 2 of the horses, it actually says the earth. So I do believe this is a global context. So we have our horse that's white and our rider that has no arrows. Okay. So let me help you with your fill in the blanks. Okay, for number 1, seal 1 is a white horse. Its rider has a bow. Note he has only a bow. He is given a crown, and he goes out to conquer. Okay, so each of these 4 horses, they have a duty, they have a job to do. And so let's look at the next, well, I'll give you time to fill in. So I think now this next part that I'm in each of these sections, I am going to parallel them to Matthew 24, and that I believe is quite accurate. But the colors, the reason why I think the colors are significant is because 2 of them seem to just completely match up, the fiery red and the pale sickly. So that's why I think that actually there's significance to each of the colors. So white means typically innocence or purity. Some people actually equate this white horse with the Antichrist because Jesus comes on a white horse. So they say this is him coming into power. It doesn't mean he's going to ride on a white horse, but it's just compared to that because he comes, across in the appearance of, being the savior of the world, right? And with innocence and purity. So the rider, to fill in your blanks, the rider now has control and authority without war, only the threat of force. So it's to subdue the earth, to subdue the people. Now, the reaction that's going to be caused from global tyranny, global control, and subduing, even if it seems to come in innocence, some people are going to see what's going on and they're going to rebel. So I would compare this to the rebellions and the birth pangs of Matthew 24. So I am going to take this seal and this horse, which is to conquer, and you see the seal right here. And I'm going to take the horse and his rider, and I'm going to put it over here in the birth pangs, which is the first phase of the end of the age. Okay, so now let's go to the second horse. And this picks up at verse 3. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Verse 4. Then another horse went out, a fiery red one. And the rider was allowed to take peace from the earth so that the people would slaughter one another. And a large sword was given to him. So now he's got this large sword. He takes control yet again. When I looked up slaughter, it could be, it's very much associated with war a lot of times. It could also be, just because I don't want to pin it down to only war, it could be when just mass amount of people, because peace is taken from the earth, mass amount of people start murdering each other, and then this guy or this system that's just taken control now puts down the fighting, whether it's putting a stop to the wars or putting a stop to the slaughtering or whatnot. But either way, it works to the furtherance of this person or this world power's control. Okay, so it's a strategy to essentially take control. So seal 2 is a fiery red horse. Its rider was allowed to take peace from the earth so that people slaughter one another. I'll give you a minute to fill that in. Okay. And I believe that the red is symbolizing violence involving bloodshed. That's what I would put that with. The rider is now given authority of the sword. Okay. So I would match that with during the birth pangs, the wars and rumors of wars. Okay. And then of course, sword. That's also what he's got. And there we'll see some more matching of that with the fourth horse. Okay. So now I'm going to take this seal. See the seal being opened up, and it's the fiery red horse with slaughter. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to put that also in the birth pangs because I believe it lines up with the wars and rumors of wars. And it could be even with the plagues, if plagues were being done and used for war, because we know that modern warfare very much might include biological warfare, and so that could be part of what the plagues are used to do. Okay, is to slaughter people. Okay, so let's go on to the third seal, verse 5. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a set of scales in his hand. Then I heard something like the voice of the four living creatures say, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. But do not harm the oil and the wine." Something important to note is that means, that whole denarius thing, what that means is 1 full day worth of work equals food for 1 day. So you work all day long only to have enough money to then feed yourself. That's it. Okay, so this is poverty increases. So globally, there's a lot of poverty and the cost of food skyrockets. Okay, so we've got this black horse. So the seal number 3 is a black horse, and he's got scales, which the scales can be a symbol for maybe lawyers and justice. It also is a symbol for how they used to weigh your food. So they would put food in one side and then your money, say your denarius, on the other side, and that's how they would measure out your food. Okay, so that's why that's significant with food and taking control of the food. Okay, so for fill in the blanks, okay, so its rider holds scales in its hands. All right, now the rider is given authority over the food and money. This is also interesting with the theory, and I don't know if I necessarily ascribe to that theory that this is the Antichrist, but I definitely think this is the system that's setting up for the Antichrist to come. That I would agree with, is that when the Antichrist does get here, and we'll talk about that in a different lesson, he does have control over the food and the money. So this could be that step in that direction, or it could actually be him. I'm not sure. So I'm going to take this black horse. So black is characterized by tragedy, depression, that kind of a thing. And then also I would compare this and match it with the birth pangs of Matthew 24, the famines. Okay, so this is poverty and food is very expensive. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it over there in the birth pangs as well. Okay. Now let's pick up in verse 7, the fourth horse. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard a voice from the 4 living creatures say, "Come." And I looked, and there was a pale green horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following after him. They were given authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill by 4 different ways: the sword, famine, plague, and the wild animals of the earth. See how it says of the earth, so it's a global thing. Okay, so now we see the seal number 4, to fill in your blank. Seal number 4 is a pale green horse. Sorry, my pausing is to give you time to fill in all the blanks. All right, its rider brings death and hell follows. Now, I actually read that a little differently. I would say that, so you have your rider, either the rider's, you would think the rider's on the horse because it would ride the horse, but I would say maybe the rider gets down and he's leading, because there's definitely 2 characters here. It says they. So I take that to mean that these 4 things can happen to people who don't necessarily go to hell. So death can be caused by famine and plague and wild animals and these things, but hell follows. So that would be for the ones that actually go to hell, as they're being slaughtered, or, as these devastations are happening. So, okay. To fill in your blanks, 1/4 of the people of the earth die from these 4 different things: sword, famine, plague, and wild animals. Okay. And then if I'm going to read just real quick, it says right here, the rider was named Death and Hades. And then skip down, it says they were given authority. And then I'll skip the little interruption there. But if you just follow right down, it says to kill by the sword. So, and by famine, by plague, and by animals. So this system that's coming in, that's a global system, now has authority to kill. Okay. So to fill in your next page blanks, the rider now has authority to kill. And I would say that the green is a symbolizes sickness. That's what pale green is, specifically pale green. And then I would match this with Matthew 24 in the birth pangs, the plagues, the famine, the killing of Christians. Perhaps, I'm not sure if this involves the killing of Christians or not. I know the next seal definitely does, but it would seem to indicate that it does from when we open the 5th seal, the language. Makes it sound like other Christians have already been being slaughtered, and it uses that same word. So I'm going to take this one and the rider and this, I'm going to put it right here in the birth pangs. Now that could, it could certainly start happening into the Great Tribulation as well. But I'm going to I'm purposely have to put it somewhere. And I do think that even though it could be starting, could still be happening during the birth pang, during the Great Tribulation. The 5th seal definitely is the Great Tribulation. So just for clarity's sake, I'm doing that because I know for sure. So let's go ahead and get to the 5th seal. And that's verse 9. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slaughtered. And the Bible's going to call them Christians. This is why I think that some of that slaughtering that was happening already did involve Christians. Okay. Who had been slaughtered because of the word of God and the testimony they had given. Verse 10, they cried out with a loud voice, Lord, the one who is holy and true, how long until you judge those who live on the earth and avenge our blood? So they were each given a white robe, and they were told to rest a little while longer until the number would be completed of their fellow servants and their brothers and sisters who were going to be killed just as they had been. And that is the 5th seal. So then I don't know how much time happens for each of these, but they take a little bit of time. And this is, I believe, the full persecution of the fiery red dragon, who is, empowering the Antichrist. And he has 3.5 years, it says, to wage war against the Christians. And it says that in Revelation. And I'll tell you the chapter and verse so you can check me on that. It says that in Revelation 13, verse 5, and then following. Okay, so for 3.5 years, the Antichrist is going to wage war on the Christians, and it distinctly talks about what they believe and all of these things. So there's no ambiguity there. So I'm going to put seal number 5 in the Great Tribulation right here.
Okay. Question for you, Ruth.
Yes.
The references that you have that are, I'm sure, does Mary have those are those in the PowerPoint as well? The Revelation and the ones that you'll, add on extra references to, or are you actually going off of the PowerPoint as far as the verses and everything?
I have most of the verses. I didn't have the Revelation 13:5.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just gonna note it since
That
I didn't.
just now.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, all right, so let's make sure that we fill in the fifth seal on your handout. Seal 5 is the killing of more Christians, and I would match that with the Great Tribulation, phase 2, the killing of the elect in Matthew 24. Okay, so let's go to the sixth seal, which is going to be verse 12. Then I saw him open the sixth seal. A violent earthquake occurred. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of hair, and the entire moon became blood. The stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its unripe figs when they are shaken by a high wind. Verse 14. The sky was split apart like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain, note every mountain, and island, so that's every island, was removed from its place. Verse 15. Then the kings of the earth, the nobles and the generals, the rich and the powerful, and every slave and free person hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Verse 17, because the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? Okay, so let's look then and fill out our blanks. Seal 6 is the day of the Lord. We know that description from when we did our chronology of Matthew 24, because it was talking very descriptively, the same description of the day of the Lord. Okay, earthquakes, this is the description. This is a number under number 1. Sun goes black, moon red, stars fall, sky splits, every mountain gone, every island gone. Unbelievers run from God's wrath, which is now coming. Important to remember that the tribulation is not God's wrath. It's coming right here at this point. It says that God's wrath is coming. And then Christians stand, and we learned from when we did Matthew 24 that the Christians stand before the Son of Man at this point, and that's when they're raptured. Okay, so interestingly, if you read, if you continue reading on, and you're going to see in chapter 7, you're going to see the 144,000 sealed. And then picking up at verse 9, you're going to see the rapture. And I'm going to read that in just a second. Let me finish here. I'm going to give you guys just a second to fill out. That's a lot of fill in the blanks. I would match this with the day of the Lord, phase 3 of Matthew 24. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to pick up at verse 9, and it's, I believe, a description of the rapture. After this, I looked, and there was a vast multitude from every nation, tribe, people, and language, which no one could number, standing before the throne, before the Lamb. They were clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands. And then I would very much encourage you to read the whole rest of the chapter later, but I'm going to now skip to verse 13 because it explains exactly who these people are. Verse 13, then one of the elders asked me, who are these people in white robes and where did they come from? Verse 14, I said to him, sir, you know. Then he told me, these are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And then verse 16 describes a little bit of what we already learned is going on during the tribulation. They will no longer hunger. They will no longer thirst. The sun will no longer strike them, nor will any scorching heat. Okay, so that is I believe, the rapture that is describing the Christians now with Jesus. Thank the Lord. Now, chapter 8, verse 1 describes the seventh seal. So the seventh seal, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to go take this sixth seal and put it in the day of the Lord, third phase. And then, so now we have the seventh seal. Okay? So that's chapter 8, verse 1. When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. Okay, and then it's going to go on and give more details, but I'm going to skip down to verse 5. The angel took the incense burner, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it to the earth. There were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Okay, now these I'm going to compare because that is not mentioned in this timeline here, but it is mentioned 3 times in Revelation. So I'm going to show you that this matches with the 7th bowl and the 7th trumpet. So let's go and find that 7th trumpet. You would turn the page to Revelation 11. And I'm going to show you real quick 2 different viewpoints on this. And then I'm going to show you which one is my viewpoint. Okay. So the majority of people believe that you read Revelation like this. Okay. You say the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and then the 7 bowls. The problem with that is something I'm going to show you right now. Okay, so let's look at the 7th trumpet. Verse 15 of chapter 11 of Revelation. The 7th angel blew his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, now let's pay close attention to what they're saying. The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. So now, Jesus' kingdom, he's reigning on earth. He's already on earth now. Okay, now look at verse 19. Then the temple of God in heaven was opened, and the Ark of the Covenant appeared in his temple. There were flashes of lightning, rumblings, and peals of thunder, an earthquake, and severe hail. So this time we have added to that severe hail. But the rest of that description is the same as what we just saw in the 7th seal. Okay? So that's interesting. Now let's turn to the 7th bowl in Revelation 16. At the very end, we're going to pick up at verse 18. There were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake occurred like no other since people have been on the earth. So great was the quake. And then verse 19 describes a different subject. So we're going to skip down to verse 20. Every island fled and mountains disappeared. Enormous hailstones, each weighing about 100 pounds, fell from the sky on the people, and they blasphemed God for the plague of the hail because the plague was extremely severe. And so we just heard it for the last trumpet, severe hail. So this gives a better description of the severe hail, but it describes these rumblings, flashes of lightning, peals of thunder, earthquake. Okay, so you can see that those happen at the same time. So the typical view, like I said, is like this, but the problem with this view, in my opinion, is that how can you have here all the islands and mountains are done away with? Here you have the peals of thunder. Jesus has set up his kingdom, the peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and earthquake. How can you have that? And then all of a sudden you go back to them all being back in place and you start the whole trumpets. And then it all happens again, the same description, and then you go back to it hasn't happened at all, and then it happens again. I do not think that's the right way to look at that. So my view is like this. Number one, I think the seals are an announcement. And by the way, to be fair to this view, some of them explain it as an announcement. They say it's not the actual events, it's just the announcement of the events. I don't know. I think that because we have the seals, I think it's safe to say that the seals are the announcement because you see you haven't opened the scroll yet. And so I think that inside, I don't think you can, I would not say those are announcements anymore. So I would say the announcement is like this. This is what's going to happen. I think they all end at the same point. Okay. But then the trumpets, I believe, start here a little while into the seals that we just learned about. And then the bowls, if I could get these numbers to go closer together, but I couldn't, or they'd be on top of each other, I would have put it over here a little more because this is the wrath of God. And when we get to the bowls, you'll see it's actually called the wrath of God. Okay, so I would push that over there to once Jesus comes. All right, so that is, I think, a better explanation for how to read that. It's not like the writers can write on top of each other, you know, so you have to consider that. Okay, so let's look. And that's why at the bottom of your page, your handout, it says match 7th trumpet and 7th bowl. So that's what we just did. Now I'm going to show you, just a minute. All right. Joel, let's turn to the book of Joel. So Hosea, Joel, back in the Old Testament. Joel chapter 1 and 2. And actually the whole thing, all of the book of Joel is an end times. It's all about end times. There's locusts in chapter 1, the beginning of chapter 1. There's a lot of description of locusts. It's like locusts like never before, seems to start before even the seals. But I don't really mention it in my presentations very much. I'm mentioning it now just so that you can see the context. The reason why I don't usually mention it that much is I'm not really sure how we would be able to tell over here in America if there was a locust problem like never before, just because I looked this up years back and I couldn't figure out what was true as far as like the media. It seems like every year they hype it as like the biggest one of all time, kind of like they do with like the hurricanes of Florida or just different catastrophes. They're trying to get, you know, they're trying to get people to watch their show, so they act dramatic. So I can't really tell. I would think that the local farmers there would be really the only ones that would know. Okay, they'd be able to tell their children, which actually talks about that, you know, tell your children, the next generation in verse 3. And so it's saying, you know, has this ever happened like this before? And so they would be able to say, this has never happened before. It's never been this bad with the locust. Okay. So we're going to pick up at verse 15. And I think that's an announcement that the day of the Lord is coming near. And it lets us know this is an end times book. And it keeps doing that throughout all of the book of Joel. And I think it's to give context. Hey, this is all about the time of the end. Okay. So we'll pick up at verse 13. Woe because of that day, for the day of the Lord is near, and it will come as devastation from the Almighty. Verse 16. Hasn't the food been cut off before your eyes, joy and gladness from the house of our God? The seeds lie shriveled in their casing. So he's describing a famine. The storehouses are in ruin, and the granaries are broken down because the grain has withered away. Okay, so that I would propose is the 3rd and 4th seal that we just learned about, how it's the famine, okay? And it's the famines of, I believe, the birth pangs of Matthew 24, okay? Now, verse 18 is going to describe, I believe, the first trumpet, which I know we didn't get into this time. We'll get into that next time. But I'm just showing you, I'm trying to prove to you with scripture, this philosophy, this belief that I have here, that right after this 4th seal, which is the famines, right? That the 3rd and 4th seal are the famines. And so it's describing here in Joel the famines. Right after that is, I think, the description of the first trumpet. Okay, that's why I'm placing it there. Okay. Verse 18. How the animals groan. The herds of the cattle wander in confusion since they have no pasture. So the first trumpet, you can check and read after me. The first trumpet is all the grass of the earth is burned up. So they have no pasture. The animals, they don't have anything to eat. Okay. Every flock, even the flocks of sheep and goats suffer punishment. I call to you, Lord, for fire has consumed the pastures of the wilderness, and flames have devoured all the trees of the orchard. So also the first trumpet is that a third of the trees are burned up. And the way that the grass is destroyed is also burning up. So this is talking about fire has consumed the grass and the trees. Okay. So the first trumpet. Then it goes on about what this causes for the animals. Even the wild animals, remember how it said wild animals? Even the wild animals cry out to you, for the riverbeds have dried up, and fire has consumed the pastures of the wilderness. So the second trumpet is that the sea is affected, and the third trumpet is that the rivers are gone bitter, or a third of the water has gone bitter. So the animals don't have enough to drink, and the bitter water is killing people, which would seem to follow that it would also be killing animals. So the wild animals are in distress. They're hungry and they're thirsty. And if you remember, in the fourth seal, it said the wild animals were attacking and killing people. So I would propose this is why. Okay. I also think that it's because we saw here just with COVID-19 and a little tiny, I do not think COVID-19 is the fourth seal. That is not what I'm saying. But I'm saying we saw a little kind of warning sign, I think, to show what happens is that wild animals started going to the cities in some of the news reports. And they're very territorial because people went inside and there were less people. And so the animals came out. You've probably heard of this. People, the news will be like, oh, the wildlife is back and they're enjoying the earth or whatever. You know, we've all heard this on the news. So we can see what happens. Well, imagine when it's a much more severe plague and people are in for longer. This is going to be hungry animals that don't have anything to eat. They don't have anything to drink. And the people are inside. It's all happening at the same time. So I would propose that this is describing that time period. And then you can go on your own, and I will bring it up when I come and teach on the trumpets the next lesson. I will describe, I'll pick up at chapter 2 and show you that it continues talking about the next trumpets as well. So even more confirmation, I think, that this is actually a better way to understand Revelation without having contradiction. Okay, so I am then going to take, that was a big explanation, to say the seventh seal I'm going to put in the day of the Lord as well. All right, and that concludes our study on the seals and how they correspond with Matthew 24 and the chronology of the end of the age. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.